Truth or fiction, the Frank Dux legend? Oh yeah, the story of Frank Dux, martial arts master, the practitioner of the dim mak, or death touch. I know, many people dispute this and think that there's no such thing, and many martial arts practitioners would tell you that it's a fantasy that's bound up in a movie. The dim mak is real enough as some people tell it, and funny enough, it's practiced by many people throughout the world. Frank Dux's use of this deadly technique, as seen being portrayed by Jean-Claude Van Damme in the movie, is a bit exaggerated obviously, but one should be able to believe that the origins of the dim mak are real as well. I recently went on a trip to try and find out not only where the famed Kumite that Dux fought in was held, but I also tried to follow the man's legend from his time in the US Marines to his position as one of the deadliest fighters in the world. Being a student of Dux's, well, from a distance at least, it's easy to admire the man and how his secret life inspired a movie such as Bloodsport. Dux has gone on to tell his story to his students over the years, and it's been my goal for a while now to retrace his steps. All I really had to go on was the movie and the words of the real Frank Dux, which were so heavily disputed that it was a wonder the man even showed his face anymore. Still, reaching out to him didn't provide any further clues, so I headed for the place that was named as his first entry into the ultra-secretive contest known as the Kumite. Yes, I know, Kumite is a common word for a style of karate, but according to Dux, it was also one of the most clandestine and well-respected fighting tournaments in the world, as they selected only the best to come and test their skills against one another in a single elimination tournament that lasted for days. Nassau, located in the Bahamas, was my first stop since after a few minutes of extensive searching and careful scrutiny of the haters that were attempting to bury Dux's good name, I came upon this one clue that I felt certain would help me. It's funny that after all this time that Dux wouldn't comment any further on various aspects of the Kumite, especially since entities such as the Black Dragon Fighting Society have been disbanded for years, so it should be safe to speak. Frank Dux is the type of person that men and women look up to thanks to his bravery for his country as a US Marine, and as a man that brought us deeper into the world of underground fighting than many have dared throughout the years. Traveling to Nassau was kind of a long trip from Los Angeles, especially stuck in economy class wedged between two men that were happy enough to talk about the movie Bloodsport but became less companionable when I told them about my purpose for traveling to Nassau. It's sad really, but Frank Dux's reputation has taken one hit after another over the years regarding his time as a Kumite champion and as a real martial artist. I was a good soldier, walking the back trail of a great martial artist to prove that he didn't deserve the hate, the ridicule, and that his martial arts were every bit as real as that poser Jean-Claude Van Damme's. Yes, JCVD did compete, but according to Dux, Van Damme wasn't all that skilled until he spent 3 grueling months training the actor for his role. But upon reaching Nassau I shook both men easily as they went on their way, and I started my search for the location where the famed Kumite had taken place so many decades ago. Some looked at me as though I'd said something funny, others could only shake their head and say that they'd never heard of it. But after 2 days of looking around the same 12 square miles, I had to give up and move on to the next leg of my trip. Surely a man as great as Frank Dux would have left some other sign or made an impression somewhere. While my next stop was based largely on the movie he'd helped to create, it was still a belief at the time that Kowloon Walled City in Hong Kong would hold at least a few answers. Plus, as much as I love martial arts and have been practicing for years on my own, my skill is homegrown due to an aversion to the germs that are so plentiful in most dojos. But getting back to the main point, I'd struck out in Nassau, and was off to Kowloon Walled City, or at least where it used to be, since by the time I arrived the place had been leveled apparently. When asking around I found that it had been taken down in 1993, and that Bloodsport had been the last movie filmed within the walls. I wasn't too upset about that, but when I mentioned the great Frank Dux a lot of people either knew nothing about him or looked ready to spit at me when I said his name. I didn't really understand this last reaction, especially when a few older men looked ready to stand up and see if their stick-like arms could do anything against my beefy, home-trained pythons. I'm glad that I didn't need to teach the men a lesson, since after showing how much faster I could run, I think my point was made. How could one of the greatest men in the world have left so little of himself to follow? Over the years he had managed to establish himself as one of the deadliest fighters after defeating more men than any 2 movie stars put together could ever claim in real life. In his book, The secret man he was mum about the other locations of the Kumite, as it's likely that he didn't want to expose the tournament or the implication that the International Fighting Arts Association, or IFA, knew anything about it. While the IFA has since disbanded, the Kumite is apparently still held every 5 years according to Dux and his students, so one would think that there would be some clue as to where it was happening. Trying to conceal an event isn't that hard, but as I sat thinking on the long trip home, this time seated next to a small Asian woman who smelled of shrimp and some spice I can't name, I came to an unfortunate line of thinking. It didn't make sense that one of the most influential men in martial arts would hide like this, especially since he was a badass that had been to Vietnam and had taken on one covert mission after another for his country. It's not hard to think that the government might scrub his military record and everything that had made him great just to make him look like a regular soldier. Well, when I returned home, I did a bit more research, and then had to stop for the next 3 days. At first, I decided it was a lie, that some internet troll had been busy for the past few decades and had somehow made it appear as though one of the bravest men in the world was in fact a conman that had managed to fool many people, myself included. I learned more about the Kumite and learned that there were no records of a great gathering that had ever taken place in Nassau back in the 1970s. Frank's military records might have been scrubbed, but it's more likely that he made up a bunch of the stories he'd relayed to others. Much of what Dux claimed was verifiable only by one person, the same man that had started the rumor of so many grandiose life events. It's likely that something like the Kumite has been in place for a long time, and in fact, there is a Kumite tournament, but leg snapping, neck breaking, and lifelong maiming isn't the point of it. As for Frank Dux, I'm still betting that to this day that he is a decent martial artist, but as far as anything else goes, it's likely that he's convinced himself that his extraordinary life is real, so catching him in a lie isn't likely to happen. For me, Senzo Tanaka, Roy Chiao, will always be my favorite Shidoshi, and I will keep the image of the Frank Dux legend I had as a kid in my head.